We're now going to play the video of Joanna Cherry, who is a UK parliamentarian. It's Lesbian Visibility Week this week, and she did an amazing speech in the House of Commons in Britain.
But the website put up for this week says it's about the power, or celebrating the power of sisterhood by uplifting incredible LGBTQIA women and non-binary people. And I think it's a real shame that in the week about our visibility, the lesbian identity is being subsumed into a number of other identities which have nothing to do with being a same-sex attracted woman. Many lesbians fundamentally disagree with this, and I want to speak up for them today. They need someone to speak up for them. It's a mark of how marginalised lesbians have become in our society that so few honourable members have turned up today. That's the reason I'm speaking from the SNP front bench, despite having been removed from it several years ago, partly for being the wrong sort of lesbian and one who doesn't believe that the rights of men who say they are women should trump those of lesbians. Before I go any further, I want to declare an interest as a supporter of LGB Alliance and a member of the advisory boards of both the Lesbian Project and Sex Matters. But my main interest in this issue is that I am a lesbian. I came out in the 80s when homophobia and lesbophobia were still rife across the UK, and my first activism was against Clause 28. In those times, like many other lesbians, I was physically assaulted in the street for being a lesbian and mocked. And lesbians of my generation also faced losing our jobs and our children. For a long time, we thought lesbophobia had gone. But lesbophobia is back, and it has been created by those who think the rights of lesbians are conditional on them accepting gender identity ideology. They are not. Lesbians are same-sex attracted women, and we are protected on that basis from discrimination, bullying and harassment under the Equality Act, where our protected characteristic is sexual orientation. Our protection is on the basis of our sex, not our gender, and as J.K. Rowling has said, without sex, there can be no same-sex attraction. That is why lesbians like me fight the replacement of the biological reality of sex with the nebulous concept of gender. Now, a moment ago, I used the phrase that the rights of lesbians are not conditional on accepting gender identity theory. That's a direct quote from my friend Alison Bailey. As some members will know, Alison Bailey is a black lesbian barrister who nearly lost her job for standing up for the rights of lesbians. Other lesbians have faced similar persecution. My friends Kate Harris, Bev Jackson and Eileen Gallagher had to fight a lengthy court battle to protect their charity, LGB Alliance, from being removed from the charitable register as a result of malicious legal action. Justice prevailed and they won the case, but shamefully, those who sought to destroy a charity run by lesbians for lesbians included members of this House. And it wasn't the first time that members of this House have displayed hostility towards lesbians. As the Father of the House said a moment ago, when I was invited to speak on a cross-party panel at the first LGB Alliance conference back in October 2021, I faced the challenge of crossing a picket line which included a heterosexual female MP who, together with self-styled trans rights activists, was protesting against the rights of lesbians to organise a conference to talk about lesbian and gay rights. Just let that sink in. That's where we've got to. Heterosexuals telling lesbians that we can't hold a conference. Now, there are many lesbians who have been persecuted for refusing to bend their knee to gender identity ideology. Some have faced losing their jobs and their livelihoods, and some have also faced violence or the threats of violence. And I want to just name a few of them this afternoon. All of them are or have become my friends as a result of our struggle. Lucy Massoud, Professor Kathleen Stock, Julie Bindel, Professor Joe Phoenix, and my dear friend Dr. Shireen Benjamin, a Labour activist who has been treated appallingly by the University of Edinburgh. There are many other lesbians whose lives have been severely restricted by gender identity zealots. We're not allowed to have lesbian-only social events. The only venues left for lesbians say they are inclusive, and that means men are included. Women's sports are also now inclusive, which means that they include men while excluding lesbians who want to play on women-only teams. Recently, a lesbian coming to view democracy in action at the Scottish Parliament was told by security that she could not enter the building wearing a small pin badge reading Scottish lesbians. I'm wearing that same badge today in solidarity with Scottish lesbians, who are an excellent grassroots lesbian collective. Across the United Kingdom, lesbians have been intimidated at pride marches, spat on and assaulted for simply asserting their rights to say that lesbians are same-sex attracted. And at a recent event for women in Edinburgh, men, counter-protesters, held up vile, abusive, lesbophobic signs. The police did nothing, because for all the furore in Scotland about hate crime, it seems that hate directed at lesbians doesn't count. Now, I don't believe the interests of lesbians are being properly represented by organisations such as Stonewall and the organisers of Lesbian Visibility Week, because in their determination to promote gender identity ideology and to keep themselves in a job by doing that, not only do they fail to represent lesbians, but they actually promote lesbian invisibility and lesbian erasure. Madam Deputy Speaker, most people think it is absurd to say that a man can be a lesbian, and most people think it's absurd to say that lesbians have penises. And they are right, it is absurd. And I'm proud to be able to stand up in Lesbian Visibility Week in the House of Commons and say so. And I'm proud that I can stand up and speak for the lesbians who reject the forced teaming of lesbian with other groups that have completely different issues from us. Stop lumping us together with those other groups. It has the effect that our interests are obscured or overlooked altogether, and it renders us invisible. It's interesting to reflect on the fact that back in 2021, the Inclusive Britain report found that aggregate terms like BAME were no longer helpful and took no account of the differing needs and outcomes of those included under that umbrella, and that they should be dropped. And the findings of that report were adopted by the government, and the acronym BAME is no longer used in government. I and many other lesbians think the same principles should be applied to acronyms like LGBTQIA+, so that lesbians are not force-teamed with other identities. Now, yes, of course.
Very grateful to the Honourable Lady. And actually reflecting on the speech we heard earlier from my friend, Honourable Member for Brent Central, what we could all benefit from in this debate is a little bit more love and compassion, and anybody that is setting out to do anything other than demonstrate love to people that do or think differently, then perhaps they need to think again.
Well, yes. But there also has to be room for difference, and there has to be room for someone such as me to speak up on behalf of some lesbians who feel the way that I do. And we're quite large in number. I don't pretend to speak for all lesbians, but none of the other lesbians in this house speak for all lesbians either. I am putting forward what I consider to be a valid viewpoint. Most importantly, it is a viewpoint that is backed by the law of this land. Now, I'm constrained by not having as much time as I would have liked. I would have liked to have talked about the CAST report. I would have liked to have talked about how the CAST report has identified that a large percentage of the girls presenting with gender dysphoria are same-sex attracted young women. And I would like to have time to talk about how important it is that we don't shut down holistic talking therapy for such young women. But I'm going to bring my comments to a close now by saying this. In my belief, in the view of many lesbians and in the eyes of the law, a lesbian is a woman whose sexual orientation is towards other women. Those who think lesbians include men are deluded. You cannot be a responsible lawmaker if you believe that any man can be a woman just by saying so. That's an old joke, worthy of the worst nights in student union bars back in my youth, with drunk testosterone-fueled men telling me and other lesbians that all we needed was the right man. In future, let's try and retain our grasp on what a lesbian is. Many lesbians are sick of being bossed about by all of those who promote their cult beliefs that gender trumps sex. It doesn't, it never has, and it never will.